The Pepper Pot is back with the Seattle Kraken. But for how long?
You are Locked On Kraken, your daily podcast on the Seattle Kraken, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, what do you say, Seattle hockey fans? Welcome to another episode of Locked On Kraken, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where we bring you your favorite team, the Seattle Kraken, every single day. Erica L. Ayala here, your host of Locked On Kraken, and as you can see, I am not wearing the UMA hat, which means the Seattle Kraken were not victorious against the Minnesota Wild last night. In fact, they fell to the Wild 4-3. This was an interesting game. A very interesting game, including that the Seattle Kraken outshot the Minnesota Wild 11-1 in the third frame. However, could not get the W. Another thing that I think a lot of people picked up on was the vibes, perhaps. And we're going to have Zane Begg on a future episode, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that. But of course, with the trade deadline looming, all eyes on Yanni Gourde, who in fact made his return to the ice. And let's start with Yanni Gourde for so many reasons, including why today, or last night, I suppose, was just a good feeling for him overall.
You missed playing a game
a lot.
The last 2 months. Yeah,
a lot. It was a lot of fun to be out there and to play with the guys tonight and enjoy playing hockey again, being at the rink and the little stuff of being an NHL player. It's fun. It was fun to be back.
You'd been pretty active in practice the last few days. How did it feel to actually get out here?
Felt very good. Felt really good, and I pushed it in practice because I know if I want to go and play a game, I'm not going to go half fast, so I'm going to go all out, and I was pushing it in practice to the extent I was pretty much playing games in practice. So and I felt good tonight.
I mean, I want to stop it right there. We'll hear a little bit more from Yanni Gourde as the episode resumes, but he said he was going full tilt in practice because he wanted to be able to participate fully when he hit the ice. Again, Zane will give his feedback on how this game went, and we can look at some of his numbers, his time on ice, etc. He was just a little bit under 90% from the face-off dot, for example, played about 15 minutes. So, not bad. Yanni Gourde will point out something very specific about his game in a little bit, but the fire, the energy, the pepper pot has been missing for this Seattle Kraken team. When we heard from Dan Bilesma, he felt that the goals early on really impacted how the Seattle Kraken were able to bounce back. They bounced back within a goal. That being said, a little too soft, some soft goals. There was a goal that was recalled. There was a scenario where Joey Daccord felt he was impeded, and he was indeed, there was a stick that got into his equipment. That being said, the Seattle Kraken didn't feel that they had a good challenge on that particular goal. Not considered a quality start for Joey Daccord. I do think some of the let-ups were a little easy, but for me, it goes back to two things, this Minnesota game. One is what the Seattle Kraken didn't do, and the other is what the Minnesota Wild did effectively. The Seattle Kraken did not pay heed to my advice on yesterday's episode, and they were not clean in front of Joey Daccord. Now, these shots were pretty clean from the Minnesota Wild, but also what the Minnesota Wild was doing is that they had traffic. They were always having someone around Joey Daccord. And so some of the shots he didn't see, or he was overcorrecting his position, and that left him exposed So again, pretty clean shots from the Minnesota Wild, but they were pestering. And so that's what we wanted the Seattle Kraken to do, but in fact, the Minnesota Wild did it. So, in my estimation, this was an okay game, I guess, by the Seattle Kraken. It just didn't have the elements of fire and fight in a team that knows that they need to prove what kind of team they're going to be, and a team that, maybe is wallowing a little bit too much at the trade deadline instead of embracing and appreciating that this team is very likely going to look different. And Yanni Gourde addressed some of that. I'm going to play you the clip on today's episode, but we're also going to go a little bit more in depth with Zame. So just a heads up there. But because we're going to be talking about this, Yanni Gourde and Brandon Tanev all week for the rest of the week. But here's specifically what Yanni Gourde said about the looming trade deadline. You might have seen this on social media for Locked On Kraken, or on my social media, I should say, and the Locked On Kraken YouTube page. But here's Yanni Gourde discussing the trade deadline and his situation at the trade.
I'm focusing on what I can control, and that's not. I can control showing up tomorrow, working hard, and that's all I can control, and that's what I'm focused on, and we'll see what happened in the next few days.
Last year they got edged on with an extension right before the trade deadline. Is that something they've broached with you at all up to this point?
We've. There's been communication, but yeah, that's all I'm going to say for now.
So that was Yanni Gourde. I talked to you yesterday about the fact that we were hearing things regarding Yanni Gourde and a potential extension. He confirms that those have been part of the conversation. So now it's just a hurry up and wait with regard to that. I want us to hear a little bit more from Yanni Gourde with regard to his return to play, how he felt he did and how he felt the team did. We'll also, of course, break down more trade deadline updates. This time I want to lean into something that we're hearing coming from the camp of Brandon Tanev. All that coming up on today's episode of Locked On Kraken. Today's episode of Locked On Kraken once again brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. When the game tips off, NBA action is just getting started. And there's no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game. So even if you miss the opening tip-off or want to bet on a fourth quarter comeback, you can stay in the action. And if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets into a same game parlay. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA and a partner of the Locked On Podcast Network. And thanks as always for making Locked On Kraken a part of your daily destination. Erica L. Ayala here. And I want to go over some notable stats from this game. For me, again, this was kind of a meh game for the Seattle Kraken. I mentioned not a quality start for Joey Daccord. It was a quality start, though, for the Minnesota Wild and goaltender Philip Gustafsson. We did not see Marc-Andre Fleury in this game, but expecting that was his last appearance at Climate Pledge Arena. Considered a quality start. Allison Lucan and her instant analysis, 33 for 36 saves for Gustafsson, a 1 above expected. Joey was under 2 of his expected saves, 15 of 19. Now, here we go. 19 shots for the Minnesota Wild, 36 shots for the Seattle Kraken. So I guess when I'm manifesting or predicting, I have to be a little bit more specific because we've been talking about shot volume, but the shots, they weren't falling for the Seattle Kraken, not even close. And if we take a look at the shot locations unblocked for the Seattle Kraken at even strength, I am going to data visualization here. I think that both what happened at even strength and of course what happens on special teams, once again, very, very illuminating for this Seattle Kraken team, but maybe not in the way we want. Okay, so here's the even strength shots for the Seattle Kraken. You can see a goal in red, something that hits the iron kind of in this pink purple, a save and a miss. So you see the Larson goal here. Shane Wright goal was a beautiful goal. And the Brandon Montour goal almost in the same spot as the Shane Wright goal. So those are kind of overlapping. Larson, Wright, and Montour. Shane Wright getting into this area here, though, and trying to make something happen. You can see Bjorkstrand getting in deep, Burakovsky, Tolvanen, but still a decent amount of the shots for the Seattle Kraken kind of coming above the circles, and not enough in the high danger or high danger area for the Seattle Kraken. So if we go back here and look at their shots on special teams, I mean, what? Nothing in the Royal Road in the slot. Now, Shane Wright did cut across for this goal, FYI. I mean, McCann right here, I guess. Montour super high. But this is with the Seattle Kraken on the power play. This is where we want to see the shot volume go way up, as well as be able to get to the hard areas. That is something that the Minnesota Wild did much better than the Seattle Kraken. So if you look at the goals or anything that hit iron for the Seattle or for the Minnesota Wild, Nyquist, Zooks, Spurgeon, Gaudreau here, closer and a lot more activity in this slot area and in front of the net comparative to the Seattle Kraken. And then especially on their one power play opportunity, I mean, that's right in front. And that goes back to the point I was making with regard to the Seattle Kraken. They allowed the Minnesota Wild to literally hang in front of the net. That's, and it was enough. It was enough, even though the Minnesota Wild were outshot. It was enough, even though, they didn't have the lion's share of the opportunities on special teams. If we go back to the stats, it was, 1 of 1 on the power play for the Minnesota Wild, 50%. So better for the Seattle Kraken than their averages. And they can still do a lot better. But love that. That was Shane Wright with Bjorkstrand and Capo Caco. Yanni Gourde did get an assist on the Brandon Montour goal. And the reason I like that play is because it's Yanni looking like he's gonna, circle the wagon, so to speak, going below the goal line. And then he abruptly stops, cuts back, and makes a nice pass. And We don't see that very often from the Seattle Kraken. And that's why he's the pepper pot. That's why, with some of the stats that I went over yesterday, he makes such an impact. Yanni Gourde, though, was critical about his game and about the team's game after the loss. Here's what he had to say.
Yeah, I thought we played pretty well, but we got to clean up some stuff. Obviously, like I make a bad play on that turnover, not really turnover, but on that mishandle the puck, and then they end up scoring a game-winning goal. Like that's in my control. I gotta make a better play there. Like there's little details of our game that we have to be better at, and if you clean that up, I think I liked our effort tonight, and I liked the way we played. We played faster. We played faster through the neutral zone. Our D were quick up. Our forwards were ready, and we went in the O zone. And in the third period, there was a lot of that, and it's good to play that way. It's fun. Like you get the puck more often. You play with possession a little bit more, and but again, detail of the game, you got to make him, and you got to clean those up and be ready to play next game.
Yanni, last year they got Ebbs done with an extension, right?
I mean, I love that. Yanni is such a leader for the Seattle Kraken, using himself as an example on the things that this Kraken team absolutely needs to clean up. He talks about when the team is playing with pace, it's fun, it's a better game. And when they slack on the details, this was another game where, had the Seattle Kraken put in more effort and paid attention to the details, this game could have gone differently. But the motivation, the fire under the rumps, doesn't come for the Seattle Kraken team until late. And it's one thing to, this is not a rope-a-dope situation where the Seattle Kraken are like, oh, haha, or like a Seabiscuit thing, we're better in the stretch. No, we're not even roping the dope. We're not successfully coming from behind. We're just, I don't know. Whatever is said in the locker room, whatever epiphanies this team has, I wish they would have them before the puck drops in the first frame. It's the constant, just absent-minded mental errors and just a scotch less than their best effort. That's what we're seeing from this team. And, maybe you can say, oh, well, clearly they're tanking. Is it clear? Is it clear that they're tanking? Because the Seattle Kraken don't have great odds to get the number one pick. They don't. And if you listen to the show for long enough, I vehemently agree with the idea of tanking overall. I think it rewards bad behaviors that can become toxic to culture. But it's frustrating. It's frustrating to see a team that has the potential, maybe not completely to be a playoff team, to even be, to make a deep run for sure. I think we're a little ways away from that. But it's because it seems to be because of the mental aspects of the game. Yes, there are some things and how this team is built that need restructuring. And more than any other season, for me, this season, the story has been that the players on the ice are just coming short of fully committing to doing what it takes to win hockey games. And, I don't mean it in I'll say it this way. I hope it's not something that is, intentional because, you can say, oh, this team is looking to tank. We were doing this before we could have reasonably been expected to tank. This is an ongoing thing with the Seattle Kraken team. And something's got to give. And it would be unfortunate. It is unfortunate that some of the players with the best giddy up, with the best internal motivation, and the best energy levels are the ones on the trade block from what we're hearing. And we'll talk about the most recent rumors in just a little bit. I just want to show you game score. Talk so much about the Seattle Kraken with and without Yanni Gourde. Yanni Gourde, whether you thought he was 100% or not, top 3 in game score. Top 3 in game score, alongside Brandon Montour and Jordan Eberle, as well as Shane Wright, Jamie Alexiak, Ellie Tolvanen, and Oliver Bjorkstrand. Lars up there as well. And he gets burnt a little because of the defensive minutes that he puts in. But I mean, that's what I'm talking about. Yanni Gourde, as much as he pointed out, that one play, his defense it shows as above average here. Team defense for sure. Individual defense, a little bit of a blip there. Individual defense, you get points in the affirmative, in the positive for Oliver Bjorkstrand and Ellie Tolvanen here. Those guys working alongside Shane Wright, who also has his own little blip. I don't want to completely lay into the team for this game, not their most egregious loss. And I agree with Yanni. There are little things that this team still cannot do, seemingly, with consistency. And, it's worth calling those things out. Coming up, we're hearing some rumors, of course, Yanni Gourde, of course, Brandon Tanev, but who have the Seattle Kraken reportedly said, lose our number, he's not going. I will tell you coming up on today's episode of Locked On Kraken. Thanks as always for making Locked On Kraken a part of your daily destination. Erica L. Ayala here. And, we are going to continue to talk about the trade deadline. It's coming up. We have more with Zane Begg later on in the week. And we'll talk about some trade predictions. But something that I heard to maybe sweeten the pot with Brandon Tanev, and I've seen it a few places now, is that the Seattle Kraken might retain up to 50% of his salary. A lot of people agreeing that so Tanev's $3 million salary cap hit, so that's $1.5 million that the Seattle Kraken would retain. Folks predicting that he's going to go to Toronto in exchange for Nick Robertson and a 4th-round draft pick. This would be a homecoming of sorts for Brandon Tanev, and a lot of people thinking that, yes, indeed, he will be out. Where he goes, nobody knows. We'll find out. Yanni Gourde, some predicting that he might go back to Tampa. This prediction that I'm seeing was before he returned, so we'll see. But the haul for the Seattle Kraken would be Dylan Gill and a 5th-round pick, with the caveat that if he's healthy, the Seattle Kraken would remain 50% of the salary cap hit and get a 4th-rounder. So that could be interesting. Jamie Alexiak, mentioned him with the game score. Haven't heard too much with regard to the big rig, but we're hearing that actually the team that we just played, the Minnesota Wild, could be interested. And so it looks like what people are saying here is Alexiak to the Wild in exchange for Declan Chisholm and a 5th-round pick. If Seattle wants to retain some of the cap for Alexiak, then they get a 3rd-rounder. So right now we're talking 3rd-rounder, 4th-rounder, 5th-rounder. I heard for sure with Tanev a few different places that retaining some of his salary and his salary cap hit could be on the table. And then what are we hearing about Bjorkstrand back to Columbus in exchange for Jordan Dumas, defenseman Damon Hunt, and a 4th-round pick. Other players, Jaden Schwartz, Andre Burakovsky, and yes, Philip Grubauer on the list. Now, there's a conversation, I guess, that was happening in the press box with regard to Philip Grubauer that I have to say I strongly, and I mean strongly, disagree with. But again, Zame is going to join me. We can break that down. So, as much as we've been talking about Yanni Gourde since his return did coincide with the last home game here, we have to think of some of these other players that perhaps we haven't gotten a chance to talk to in the media. And I'm curious to see and hear who Dan Bilesma is asked about ahead of Friday's trade deadline. Usually, the Seattle Kraken general manager, Ron Francis, will talk to us at some point after the trade deadline. So we will have that for you here. But Yanni Gourde, good to see him back on the ice, even if it is temporary. But again, we're going to get into his comments regarding the process, what's happening with the trade deadline, and also some other moves that could be on the horizon for the Seattle Kraken. Zane will be joining the show. We'll break that down a little bit more on the next episode of Locked On Kraken. Until then, hold fast, stay true, be kind to yourselves, be kind to one another, and as always, we say, let's go Kraken. I'll catch you on the next episode. Peace out, everybody.